This episode of RSR is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Atom Audio, Spectra1964, Grace Design, and Picker. These are tools that I use every day in my studio, from the Spectra1964 STX600 and Native Instruments Complete 15 to Isotope Ozone and RX, Atom Audio monitoring and headphones, and the central hub for my studio, the Grace Design M701 audio interface. Check out my studio profile on the Picker app on iPhone or Android and follow the sponsor links in the show notes. Grab my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com, and remember to like this video and subscribe on YouTube because it's a great way to help support this show. Now, get ready to rock.
Most people have never heard an undistorted fundamental on a bass. They've never heard it. They've never heard the low-frequency articulation, because if you think about a bass guitar producing over 20 dB peaks, in terms of power, a conventional amplifier, let's just say guitar amplifier, is only capable of producing 1 to 5 watts, even though it's rated at 100 watts, because it's in constant overload. Well, if you get rid of the peak, you get all the harmonics, and you get the fullness of the instrument. It's reproduced accurately.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Bill Cheney, co-owner with Jim Romney of Spectra1964, the company continuing the legacy of William Dilley and the original Spectra Sonics, makers of the legendary 101 mic preamp and the sound behind classic studios like Stax, Ardent, and the Record Plant. You've heard Spectra gear on records by Aerosmith, Bruce Springsteen, ZZ Top, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, King Crimson, and John Lennon, to name just a few. Bill's been on the podcast several times before to share the incredible story of Spectra Sonics, from the 101 amplifier's roots in the Minuteman missile defense system to the consoles that helped shape the golden era of recording. Today, we'll catch up on what's new at Spectra1964, including their ongoing line of the 500 series modules like the STX100 mic preamp, which I have often used for my voice on the podcast. You can see it right behind me here. Please welcome Bill Cheney to Recording Studio Rockstars. Bill, are you ready to rock, my friend?
Thank you.
Dude, good to have you back, man. Welcome to the video studio. Here we are finally in person. People can see, you know, what the genius looks like behind the microphone for Spectra.
That's right.
You know, we've been lucky to do a few of these episodes before where we've been able to talk about the history of Spectra1964 and the history of Spectra Sonics, and what an amazing history it is.
Yes.
Yeah, but you've been, and hopefully you'll regale us with a few stories as you think of them this time. But, you know, I know that you have a lot new going on there too. And you're just always sort of like, you know, behind the curtain, you know, mad scientists in the lab, just kind of keeping things cooking. Yeah. So I thought I'd just start with that. I mean, how have you been? What's new at Spectra1964? And what kind of stuff are you excited about today?
Well, we're you know, due to what's happened in the economy, that slowed things down considerably.
Yeah.
Everybody's feeling the same pain. But we've still continued to develop products that are tied to the original designs. Because if you look at our window, the circuits we used were designed between 1964 in 1969. That's what we built. And if you look back at that, it's quite amazing that all that technology was done basically over.
And you were there at that time?
No.
Or not quite yet?
I became part of the company 78, 79.
Okay, all right.
And I was at the tail end of the recording studio consoles and basically worked in their sound reinforcement direction.
Yeah.
The studio business was in pretty poor condition when I started working there. And they were into the power amplifiers, high-intensity sound systems, big speaker systems, Hollywood Bowl systems like that.
Yeah.
And so that's primarily what I did. I still had a little bit to do with the consoles, but not much. In fact, our last console at that time was built in 1979.
So you guys have done consoles, you've done outboard gear now. The outboard equipment, that's a really a new concept, or were there C610s, the comp limiters, were those existing in parallel to consoles, or were they originally in consoles?
Well, there were a few consoles built with 610,
Yeah.
601 modules, if you want to get specific. The 610 came out in 1969
Okay.
as an outboard piece. And the piece we're building today, the C610, is essentially the same circuit, and nothing's changed. But there were a few consoles built that had the 601 module in it. And we've entertained, if and when we do the sidecar modules, they will have the 601 in it as far as the compressor limiters. But
what does that mean, the sidecar modules?
Well,
our ears perk up.
Well, we've got one project we have to finish. It's a console restoration of a 1024. It's very close, and we haven't wanted to take any more projects on until it's out of the shop. But we did 2 or 3 years ago. Actually had some of the metal work created, modules designed. Had a lot of interest in the sidecars, but unfortunately we couldn't take it on because of both the economy and prior commitments.
Yeah.
But we have worked through it. It's just a matter of timing. It may be 6 months to a year out, but we're fairly close to possibly introducing a modular sidecar piece you could custom design yourself. The back to the 610, it came out originally as a standalone piece in 69, and it was accepted widely. And back then, our customers were primarily engineers. Mm-hmm. They were degreed engineers. They knew what they were buying the day they ordered it. Rarely interfaced with the owners, unless it was to collect a check. And so it was not an issue, convincing them it worked and how it worked. Today, it's a little more difficult because of the people implementing the technology aren't wired that way. But they found their way into, they were on the disc cutters with the Neumann lathes for cutting records. It was a package. In fact, for years, I didn't know we were getting 610s in that had Longevin detented input and output faders. And
I think I still have an old Longevin module.
Right. And it came in, and I'm going, why we got recallable input and output knobs? Well, I found out later that I believe it was Gotham Audio was packaging 610s with the lathe. And so today we use 610s on lathes. I mean, they're very common. The V610 is a real common piece that's used on a lathe. But the reason they work well on that is it additional headroom because of the peak limiting in the chain, plus it also protects the cutter head. So it has several advantages, but the fidelity is much better when you go through our limiters onto the cutter. But the 610 was adopted by the radio stations. Basically, all had a 610 in front of their transmitter.
Yeah,
they all had a 610.
Right, because you have to be so careful about not overmodulating for radio.
Right, and so that's why there was a +8 setting on the original 610. That was for the broadcast industry. So a majority of the radio stations had 610s. We even had Warner Communications using 610s and their cable head ends. And they were buying, when I was working there, they were buying 50 or 60 610s at a time and putting them on their cable head ends. And they were using it for two reasons: the peak limiting, which helped the fidelity, And also they had it set so there was some compression if all of a sudden there was an overload situation coming through the input source.
Wow.
They used 610s for that, but they bought hundreds of 610s from us. But they were adopted. They were basically in every studio. A 610 was kind of the standard, a pair of them, and thousands were sold. And to my chagrin, in the early 90s, you could buy
I like to give people a call out when a first word shows up on the show, and I think chagrin. I think in 10 years of this, I think that's you're the first person to bring up to my chagrin.
Maybe it's where I'm from.
I love it. I love it. That's a great old school expression.
Yeah, that's right. It's from my age. But the early 90s, they didn't understand how they worked. And Dilly was funny. He would always tell me, if you get a phone call and the guy wants to know how to use a 610, we're not going to sell him a 610. And I always was at odds with him. I said, well, can I? No, I don't want them buying them if they don't understand what they're buying.
Interesting.
And so what happened was people lost their way on how to use a 610. And if you don't understand them, they can be tough to deal with if you don't understand a few basics. Yeah. It's like a 5-minute review, but they weren't doing what they want. So they ended up in dumpsters. And in fact, I think Chad Blake's first 610, he found it on a trash, in the trash.
Wow.
He went to lunch and came back and there was one sitting on the pile getting thrown out. And that was his very first of 6 610s that he now owns. That's how he got his first one. But that's what happened to them. A lot of them went in dumpsters. When I first started buying 610s, I was paying $100 for them, $150. And then as time went on, people started to run them in front of their digital equipment and all of a sudden realizing huge amounts of headroom. Didn't know why. And the price started to go up. I mean, you go on eBay and all of a sudden they were at $300 and $400. And then my partner came to me one day, Jim, and he said, have you seen the price of a 610? And it was over $1,000. I'm going, why? And what had happened is by luck, people were putting them in front of their digital boxes and all of a sudden getting 6 to 10 dB more headroom with less distortion.
Interesting.
And that's when we approached the Dilly family and said, well, let's build 610s again. I mean, they never really stopped being purchased or being manufactured. Spectra Sonics never did shut down as a company. They were just basically supporting what was out there. And if you wanted a 610, you could order one. It took like a month and you could buy one. So they never did stop building them, but we wanted to get into the market of, well, we'll just manufacture these. And that's when we went back and forth and finally ended up with the whole company. Yeah. And rather than just the 610s, we ended up with the whole system, with all of the equipment. But in any case, it was the person who was not maybe technical buying the 610, but could hear the difference. It was like, because when you hear a 610 in front of a lot of circuits, it's glaring what happens. I mean, everything that it follows it all of a sudden has headroom and lower distortion. And where digital is very susceptible to peak overload, the A to D converters.
Well, I think as you point out, like the people who are not technical but just hear the difference. I mean, for somebody like me in the studio, I'm not ever thinking about the technical side unless we're talking about it outside of a session.
Right.
But we just hear when something just sort of leaps out at you and sounds exciting or sounds awesome. And the C610 is the one I'm familiar with for sure. And that one, boy, you can just get sounds to it feels like you're just packing it in. It's almost like, packing the back of the tour van really well.
Right. Right.
Just loading up the sound.
And that's the thing is that made it easier to sell because you had these musicians. And that's where I really learned that musicians had an ability beyond even where I was at to hear things. Yeah. Because they would describe to me what they were hearing in a non-technical way, but it was right on, spot on. It was exactly why, well, the harmonics are there. It's more full sounding. I'm hearing the low end. I've never heard the low end on a bass guitar that was accurate, things like that. And so I typically do better with that group of customers because they haven't formed any opinions on what they're hearing or why they're hearing it. And sometimes I get established people who've known about the 610, thought it was a distortion box, and convincing them otherwise is sometimes difficult, where if you get somebody that's not familiar with our gear and starts anew, it's a lot easier to deal with that kind of a customer.
Yeah.
And I had an advantage because I was in Ogden, Utah, and I was isolated. I didn't pick up on what the trends were in LA or New York as far as circuit designs and conceptually. So I was insulated from the outside world of system design, and I was only immersed in Spectra Sonics technology. And so that's all I understood. So it kind of saved me. I didn't pick up a lot of assumptions that were typically incorrect.
How do you manage that difference between having a technical understanding of stuff versus the artistic perspective of how the gear works? And also, have you, I mean, to your point, you just sort of said that you're having conversations with people who can hear something that either you didn't hear, or you just wouldn't even have an opportunity to hear it because you're literally not in the studio listening to the same stuff in that moment. But is there a level of that where there's like, you have to be able to, you seem to have a good dialogue with the artists out there who are making the records.
Well, you have to.
And know how to translate. It's like different languages or something.
Right. But it goes back to our basis of design. We reproduce what's on the input.
Yeah.
If you're miking drums, there's a certain attack. There's a certain a snare, harmonics, kick, snare, toms. You can hear certain characteristics. So when you play it back, it's not there.
Right.
It doesn't sound like you're sitting, next to the set. And so what happens with that is when a musician, a lot of drummers, STX 100, they'll call us. They've always migrated to the 100. It's a little faster circuit, a little more pure circuit, and they'll call and they'll ask about, well, I possibly need an EQ. And our position always been, we make the best EQs in the world, but having said that, specifically on tracking, we say we'd rather you wait to consider an EQ because they're a lot of times boosting 2 and 4K, or they're making some changes with a conventional mic pre, and 9 times out of 10, they don't need an EQ because they hear when after they've recorded, it sounds just like they play it back. It sounds like they think it should sound. And so it's our concept of reproducing the accurate waveform, all the harmonics, all the dynamic range. That's readily apparent when you play it back. You can hear it. And so it's an easy sell once they hear that. So we're not really trying to get outside the realm of what they're used to hearing. Bass guitars with our limiters, most people have never heard an undistorted fundamental on a bass. They've never heard it. They've never heard the low frequency articulation, because if you think about a bass guitar producing over 20 dB peaks, in terms of power, a conventional amplifier, let's just say guitar amplifier, is only capable of producing 1 to 5 watts, even though it's rated at 100 watts, because it's in constant overload. Well, if you get rid of the peak, you get all the harmonics and you get the fullness of the instrument. It's reproduced accurately.
That's fascinating. So you really hear it in the
right.
You hear it sort of bloom in the bass amp.
Right. Had customers call, not complaining. Got a 611, which is we're going to reintroduce this year again. Bass guitar compressor limiter. And they'd done the whole album, and on the last song they got their 611. And they said, not complaining, but we're having to retrack all the bass guitar tracks because it's so apparent the difference. That we're having to redo all the tracks.
That's funny.
Because that last song, everybody went, well, the bass. In live PA, our limiters, you can hear it across the hall. You can hear the articulated bass. It's not distorted. It's not muddy. It's articulated. Yeah. And all we've done is take the peak off. We haven't done any kind of equalization, any kind of distortion. We're on the side of the boat that says, look, we're not going to add anything. We're just not going to. We're going to reproduce everything that comes on the input waveform with dynamic range in that. We're not going to subtract things, and you're not going to get a sound. Okay, we're not trying to create a sound. We're just trying to reproduce it.
All right, groovy. Well, let's see here. Let's see if I can show everybody a picture of the C610, so a comp limiter. As you can see, we got the C610 comp limiter right here. It's It's awesome. I love the retro look of the website too, Bill.
Okay.
Yeah. And then do you want to give us tell us what we're looking at here knob-wise? See if I can get it zoomed in a little bit. But we've got like input knob here, output knob. Those seem sort of easy to understand, right?
Right. And the classic, what we did was that look was produced from 1969 to about 1977, 1978. And then we went to round knobs, a different meter. It was an API meter originally, a 361. And we went to a meter that was replicating that API meter and then the knobs. So it looks really close to the original 610. That's why we call it the classic. But
it's a great look. I mean, I think you guys nailed it. It looks super cool.
Yeah.
And it's so great to see, these sort of pointy knobs where you can tell where something's set to, especially these ones that have the little.
Ironically, these were production knobs back in the day. We get into this every once in a while. People will claim they've got a trademark on knobs, but on that particular knob, it was manufactured. It was a standard off-the-shelf knob. But it was no longer available. I think we missed it by about 3 or 4 years. When we went to buy them again, they'd stopped making them, and so we had to have those. Are all aluminum extrusion knobs, custom knobs.
So this is I'm going to start on this side first. So this is the meter. So if you switch this, it's changing how this meter responds.
Right.
To showing you your right. So you've got gain reduction, or you can look at the output as a +4 level or the output as a +12 level. Is that essentially what it is?
So that gets you in the DBFS, gives you a little higher reference level.
Right.
Now the pad on that has changed. The new pad is a 3-position pad.
Oh, down here at the bottom.
Right. And what we did was we ran into a lot of DBFS issues. So what we wanted to do is give it similar pad to what the V610 has. So with no pad, you're essentially, you don't want to get too technical, -40 level.
Yeah, doesn't mine say just 0, 1, 2 or something?
Right. Like and now we've got it to where, well, no, you've got the newer one, the 1-2, which is 15 dB a pad and then 41 dB a pad. So you can really come back into it.
And it's very, very useful. I've found, I mean, there's times where I'm running maybe a bass signal. Sometimes I'm using bass through the BBDI, which probably doesn't need the pad on the way in.
That's correct.
And I've also learned, and then you can run the BBDI directly into the C610, which is a great combo.
Right.
Don't even need a mic pre. And then sometimes I'm using an active DI, and so it might be hotter level, or somebody's got an active signal that they're bringing in. And in that case, having the pad on there can be really, really helpful.
Right.
Because it just lets you sort of like really dig into the kind of compression settings you want.
Right.
Rock stars, if you want fresh song ideas, Complete 15 from Native Instruments has the tools to kickstart your creativity. With Contact 8's Chords tool, you can generate and customize chord progressions instantly for songwriting. And the Phrases tool gives you ready-to-go melodic inspiration right at your fingertips. With 165 instruments and over 150,000 sounds, Complete 15 helps you turn blank pages into music. Pair that with a Complete Control keyboard or machine hardware for seamless integration and hands-on control. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. And then when we come over here, this is where it gets unique and different for people to slope and release. And we probably talked about this before, but a brief overview.
Well, the slope is full clockwise, and that means no slope.
So if you go
full clockwise, 5
to
o'clock.
10.
Yeah, 5 o'clock, basically. If you look at a clock, that's peak limiting, no compression.
But I mean, it's written out on here as 0 to 10.
Right.
So 5 o'clock means rotating this knob clockwise until you get to 10 max.
And
so the highest number means no compression.
That's correct. And as you go counterclockwise and you're in gain reduction, the GR, the direction you're going with the slope will mimic the compression.
Okay.
So it's going. So as you give more compression, you'll see it.
So does full slope, is it the equivalent of a lower number slope is like a lower number hill, like we're climbing up a lower.
Well, the slope is a higher
number.
Compression ratio.
But I mean, it means that how do I think about this? Whereas like if it was a vertical line, does that mean that we're not really seeing compression until we hit the ceiling of the threshold, and then it's limiting only? Or am I thinking about that wrong? How do we visualize?
That's how a conventional compressor limiter works. Yeah. A conventional compressor limiter, and that's everybody else, unless I'm unaware of something different, is their peak sensing volume compressors. So if you're dealing with a 10 dB peak, that's what it will compress. And the consequence is that is you're driving your signal into the noise floor. So if you've got a 10 dB peak, you've gone into gain reduction, you're 10 dB less gain, you've pulled your gain back by that amplitude, that peak amplitude, which would be 10 dB. We're different in that the peak limiter is separate from the compressor. Okay. So what's happening there is the peak's gone, and then the compressor, which is almost as fast, the attack time on the compressor is almost the same as the limiter, it's essentially operating on its own. So it's not modulated by any peaks. It's not controlled by any peaks. So you've eliminated, let's say we're using 10 dB again. You've eliminated the 10 dB peak. You're allowed to turn your average up 10 dB without clipping, and now you're operating the compressor, which is a fast volume control, independent of that. And so it's a separate function. Has nothing to do with, they're not working interactively, so there's no pumping.
Okay.
Now the slope can go from 1:1 to 100:1. And 100:1 would be 20 dB of compression. And so,
but when we see it say 0 to 10 on the knob, we might think 1 on there would be 1:1, but that's not.
No, because the amount of low frequency content will affect where the compressor operates.
Right.
So if you've got a lot of bass, like you're doing a bass guitar, and that slope is coming on considerably earlier if you're going counterclockwise than if you were a vocal track. And below 400 cycles, that's typically where they start to become part of that circuit on the compression. So it's not fixed. You can't say the compression will occur at that number.
Where does the word slope come from? Is it from looking at a graph?
Yes.
Sort of a slope? And so is there a line on the graph that we can visualize in our head?
Yeah, in our manual, we physically do the math on the slope and how it's determined. And it's in the manual.
And is the slope sort of the input to the output?
Yes,
kind of graph?
The amount of gain reduction.
All right.
Yeah. That's the amount of gain reduction. And again, we go into it. It's a book. I used to call it a book. Dilly wrote a 30-page manual on this thing. Yeah. I rewrote it twice, trying to get some of the big words out of it. And then I did a quick, basically a quick start on it. But essentially, it does the math of how to determine even the release times.
Yeah.
You can calculate all this. What I find with the musicians, they can hear it. They know exactly where they're at.
Right. That's what I've found. You just
turn it, and if you don't have enough release time on compression, you'll hear a distortion because it's not completing the waveform. Yeah. And so I try and stay away from that manual because I do have some folks that are wired that way that, they love it, but it's 99% of the time people never even look at that. But it's all shown in the manual, the interaction of the slope.
Yeah, let's discuss the release time for a sec. So the release time, same thing. As you go clockwise, it goes from 0 to 10. So how do we think about 0 versus 10?
12 o'clock, which is top, it's right around 1 second release time.
Okay, 2 o'clock, so as we go to 10, it's a longer release
10
time.
seconds.
Right, okay.
It's 10 seconds. And it's going clockwise, the release time.
Yeah.
Now, in the limiting function only, which we're not using the compressor, that control has nothing to do with the circuit. It's purely compression.
Right.
So it doesn't matter where that's set if you're just doing peak limiting only, and that's an occasional flash of the light with no gain reduction. Now, the slope control, again, is going to be dictated on how much low frequency is in the source material. So you're doing a kick or snare or bass, it's going to be a lot longer release time than, say, a vocal.
Right.
Okay, so, and again, it's one of those intuitive things that after you use it for a while, you know exactly where you're going to be. Now, having said that, there was several years ago, I found out that Chad Blake was playing with that release time.
Yeah.
And so he was doing some things on the release time that created an artifact. I'm going to be polite to say an artifact. I'm not going to say distortion, but he was doing some things that you set your slope and then you would play with the release time and all of a sudden it just pops.
Yeah.
And everybody who owns 610s hears that. You're just playing. And he would spend a lot of time playing with the release time.
That's what I've noticed is I mess around with the slope, the release time, and then the gain. You really got to make adjustments on all the knobs to look for the sound.
Yep.
That you're wanting to get for a particular instrument.
And it's
drums particularly. Sometimes you want the drums to punch through. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're not looking for more punch. You're trying to get the, you're trying to get this very hyper compressed sound. So you're bringing up all the background room sound. And the C610, shall we jump to the fact that you guys made a plug-in too?
Yeah.
And discuss that for the C610.
Yeah, we can do that. But again, to summarize what we just said, the limiting is separate from the compressor. Yeah. A couple more things about the compressor I want to review.
Sure.
It doesn't change frequency response. I don't care if you're 100 to 1 compression. The frequency response doesn't change. The distortion doesn't go up. It's not like a traditional compressor limiter that adds all kinds of artifacts. It's not an effect. Now, having said that, if you overdrive the circuit, it sounds cool. And when we first started back with this product, everybody was saying, well, it's the coolest, gnarliest distortion I've ever heard. And I said, well, that's not our intention, but this is what you're hearing. And what's happening in our circuits, all of them, is they don't clip with peaks. They RMS clip, which means they just run out of power supply. Clipping, power supply, RMS. And so when they clip, they still have all the harmonics. And so you've got like a tube would clip that way. That's why people like tubes. Overdrive it. Yeah. You overdrive it. It has a nice fat. In fact, on our mic pre's, everybody likes doing a little bit of input overload on our mic pre's because it fattens it up a little bit.
Yeah.
It is distortion, but it's not peak clipping. Peak clipping is when the thing literally collapses, the circuit collapses because the amplitude is so high the power supply just gives out.
Right.
We're not having that issue. Right. We're just RMS clipping. We've got to a maximum, but the harmonics are still preserved.
Right.
And so you listen to the Ardent, when the Billy Gibbons guitars, ZZ Top, those were overdriven 101s on the input side. That was just what they did. They overdrew. Roy Cicala told me that at Record Plant, they would overdrive the front end because of the effects they would get. But it was pleasing. It wasn't that nasty peak clipping that just.
Yeah. Well, we loved it. I mean, that's one of the things you learn in the studio is like you certainly when you're discussing what you want to do, you sort of shy away from the words of distortion and stuff like that because you're like, oh, I want I want a good, solidly well-built studio full of good inputs and outputs. But when you're actually using this stuff, with that guitar and rock and roll and just trying to get powerful stuff that sounds like it's on the edge of, the edge of excitement, is you're pushing things and you're that's where you get into distorted guitars and you start pushing stuff and you learn that you can push your mic preamps too. Right. And you find where the sweet spots are and things. And particularly with Spectra 1964, having that, it's funny. I don't use my STX or the 100 or the 100D for a distortion artifact that I notice so much as I just notice that when you push it in and you get a little bit of that red light at the input versus the output knob, you get into that sweet sort of thickening sound, which is probably that harmonic. Maybe it's leaning towards that RMS.
There's two things going on. In a typical mic pre, you're trying to stay away from the peak overload.
Right.
And the peak lights are not fast enough to tell you how fast that peak is. Yeah, because, you're talking megacycles sometimes. Yeah. And so what happens is you're overloading and distorting. It's not predictable. And that's when you play it back, you go, what happened.
Right.
Where ours is very predictable and you know exactly where you're at. And the peak light you're seeing on our gear is the RMS clipping because it doesn't care about peaks. It's got over 25 dB of headroom on the front end.
Wow.
So it doesn't care about the peaks. And so what we're worried about is you turning that input up as high as you can to maximize that dynamic range, give the impact of the recording. And if you're 10 dB hotter than your competitor, you can hear it and feel it. And that's what you're getting, is you're getting that impact. And that's where vinyl shines over a lot of digital. You've got 10 dB of dynamic range versus a lot less than that with digital. And that's that thing you can't describe. It's just, it feels you've got impact. It feels more real.
Maybe explain that a little bit, if not to go on a tangent, but you know, we think of digital as having lots of dynamic range. So when you say there's less than that in digital, what are you referring to so that we understand a little bit better?
Well, you're limited by the ADD converters.
Right.
Okay. And you can spec 120 dB dynamic range. And it's like Dilly said to me, this came up because we were kind of tied to the PCM development of digital at the University of Utah. So we'd go to the demos and we'd hear the things in the 80s, early 80s. And he would say, well, what do you see on your VU meter? Do you see 140 dB? No. That's the first thing. The second thing is the ADD converters, you're still dealing with an analog issue. You know, and you've got a limited amount of headroom within that circuit.
Right.
Now, if you specify it as RMS, there's no peaks. That's a whole different standard than if you're putting music through it with music peaks. And so it's not 140 dB of dynamic range. It's not even close. So we're only dealing with the 20 dB you see on your VU meter and how you live within that realm. But the thing is the peaks, just keeping them at 20 dB peaks, that is huge. It's 100 times. And so if we even talk on those terms, digital has a hard time dealing with transient peaks through the converters.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I mean, it's like, you know, we again, to your point, we think about the dynamic range of the digital signal, but you got to get into the digital from the analog somehow.
That's correct.
And those converters
Yeah.
maybe necessarily can't handle that. And, you know, a lot of people, even Ronan Chris Murphy, who's coming back on the show again soon, you know, I remember during his interview, he was saying, you know, like, don't shoot your meters way up when you're recording percussive elements. You know, keep a lot of, let your meter only go halfway or something because you need all that extra headroom above it so you're not clipping out the...
and that's where our demo goes.
Going in.
When I demo Pro Tools or when I intentionally drive on percussion with a 610 on the front end into the red. I mean, like they're wincing. And they play it back and go, oh my, there's no distortion. Well, the reason there was no distortion is because the peak's gone. I didn't even compressed it. I just got rid of the peak.
Yeah.
And
that's what the C610 comp limiter.
Right, that's the limiter function.
Whereas the mic pre wouldn't do that. The STX
it just
100,
passes it. It just doesn't care. I've measured 25 dB peaks from an STX 100.
Right.
And it didn't clip.
So again, to understand some of the other designs, the mic pre wouldn't successfully pass the peak along. But with the Spectra 1964, it respects the peak until you want to control it, and then you get into the C610.
Then you get into the comp limiters because, like I say, you can pass the peak and not clip our gear, but the peak's still there. Now, having said that, the heavy lifting of the first mic stage or line level stage is the first. That's the heavy lifting. That's where the most clipping would occur. So it's not going to be as much. Say we're tied to a digital recorder, but the peak is still has to be respected. But that's a standard demo we do. We get on a guy like on we did it at Sun a few years ago, about 10 years ago. We had a pretty hot condenser sitting on a snare and just driving the meter right, on the Pro Tools right into the red, and played it back. And
the input meter.
Yeah, and he said, you can't do that. And I said, listen, and there was no distortion.
Interesting.
And so digital's not very.
So in other words, by recording through the Spectra mic pre's, we're going to find that our Pro Tools rig on playback is just way more forgiving.
Well, it's going to be better with the 100s, but the limiter is going to give even more.
Right.
That's the trick.
Because then you're really packing this.
Then it's gone. And so a standard setup, a lot of our customers will be like an STX 100 into a 610. Or they'll use our 600, which is our 500 series comp limiter, and they'll go into that. So they have our front end, then the mic pre's, which are a little quieter than the STX 600, and then they'll go into the 600 as a peak limiter, and then they go into the digital recorder.
Rock stars, if you want your mixes and masters to translate everywhere, Isotope Ozone 12 gives you the tools to finish with confidence. The new bass control helps you see and balance your low end and punch. Unlimiter brings back life to overcompressed tracks, and Stem EQ lets you rebalance vocals, drums, or bass using only the stereo mix file. And when it's time to get loud, Ozone's new IRC Maximizer gives powerful, clean masters without distortion. Go to isotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Yeah, and then let's also discuss the fact that you don't even need to have a mic pre with the C610, which there was a couple of things that I learned recently. I knew that you could plug a 57 straight in, but what I learned recently is with the V610, it actually has phantom power
That's
on
correct.
it. That surprised the crap out of me. And shout out! Oh shoot! I've apologies if you're listening now, but I have a listener who reached out to me and was talking about this, and he taught me, which is one of the things I love about all the rock stars listening to that show. I learned stuff from the audience. He's the one who hit me to the fact that there's in the V610 there is actually that phantom power, so you can plug even a condenser mic straight in and record. That could be a vocal chain.
That's a very popular setup. A lot of producers and engineers don't talk about it because it's kind of their secret weapon.
And the V610 Rockstar is this C610 comp limiter, but with detented knobs and additional features.
Yeah, it's actually switches, and there's 96 metal film resistors on the surfaces. Yeah,
wow.
Hand matched, and so that's the cost difference. I mean, you've got those Elma switches, they'll last forever.
And often that is a comp limiter that's chosen, Pete Lyman,
mastering,
for example,
right.
in the mastering stage, but discovering, unless you just want to, have a killer vocal chain, you've
right.
got one unit to get. That's your mic pre and your comp limiter
right.
and your phantom power, the
right.
whole deal. So it's pretty cool.
And the C and the V share the same motherboard. The V has the 110 amplifier for makeup gain, which is again a little cleaner, plus 24 out without clipping. Where the classic, the C, is the old 101 amplifier, plus 18 out. I mean, you can order them from us custom to have the 110 in it. It's not an extra charge. I mean, we've made them so they interchange. So you could make a C610 into a V610 as far as
and it'd be
electronics.
24 volt at that point, or it'd be a 110 on a 18 volt.
It's on
right?
24 volts.
Interesting.
So, but the 110's bipolar, 24. So it's got a 48 volt swing. So the difference between a 110 and a 101, I don't want to get in the weeds again, but the 101 was 24 volts to ground, and that was introduced in 1964 or 65. The 110A, which is the circuit is essentially the same, first three stages, the output stage is bipolar. And so it's plus or minus 24 volts.
Wow.
In its optimum.
And is that sort of Class A versus Class AB circuit design concept, or is it very different?
It's different.
Okay. All right. I know just enough from my electrical engineering minor to just get in trouble.
Yeah. Well, that's a different set. A and AB is different. Yeah. That's a whole different discussion. And I don't like talking about it too much because of the politics behind it. Because it muddies things. Why?
Interesting.
Class A's anyway. But anyway, back to the C. It's the same circuit as a V, other than it has different makeup gain amplifiers. But when we built the V, it was supposed to be absolutely like a wire. It was not to add any color. Right. Where the 101 tends to have that Stax sound, that little more rounded sound. And so my customers who are tied into that era more, they prefer the sound of a 101.
Yeah.
The 110's too clean.
Interesting.
I mean, if you figure that 110 will put out plus 26 and not clip, I mean, that's outrageous. But if you're trying to master and you're trying to, not add anything to it,
right,
that's probably the amplifier you want.
Now, what if we dig the sound of the C610, but we think, I wish I could plug my condenser mic straight in? I guess a tube mic we could plug straight in.
You get into gain issues, but if you have enough. Now, we did change the inputs sensitivity on the C610 when we brought this model out, because an SM57 to use it, you had to be wide open.
Right.
And so what we did is we changed the input setup to where 6 dB hotter. And so you're now at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock for a 57. But you're just going to have to use an outboard phantom if you want to.
Right.
That's the only unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of 610s are used on a lot of music that people listen to every day. There's a lot of 610s.
Right on.
And again, they don't like sharing that information. Years ago, I had one come in and it had to get turned around on a repair in a week. And the guy didn't want to talk about how he was using it. It was a guy in Nashville. And I said, well, how are you using it? Wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, well, it's tied to a U87. And he says, we've been using it for 15 years that way.
Cool.
On the vocals. And so, but again, that's been the hardest thing for us sometimes, to get people to let us put their name on who's using it.
Right.
They say, I prefer not, it's like STX 100s. There's some major stuff coming out right now that was produced that was all, STX 500, lunchbox stuff.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people are having allergies to, they just don't want to be around 500. But when they start demoing against a $200,000 or $300,000 console and the STXs,
well, and again, we've discussed this previously, but the design that you have for the Spectra circuits, they don't require a huge power draw from the power supply, if I recall correctly. So one of the things I learned is, if, let's say I've got a lunchbox and it's got a series of Spectra mic pre's in it, and if they were on a typical mic pre design of some other company, sort of other designs we might think of, if you play drums, you've got that transient of the drum coming through a number of different microphones all at once on the drum set, hitting all those mic pre's, and it would typically make a power supply in a 500 lunchbox sag.
It lays down. Just lays down.
Yeah, lays down, right?
Yeah.
But with the STX 100s and 100Ds, they and I suppose the 110s as well, they or any of the C600 as well, they don't get affected by that because the design doesn't draw as much power from the power supply.
Right. Give you an example. The 110 and 101 draw, and I don't want to get 20 milliamps. That's what it draws. Okay, let me give you an example. Matt Rossbang has a 20-channel Spectra 1020, 20-channel input. That whole circuit, the whole console, draws what a typical 500 series rack puts out, 2 amps. The whole circuit.
Wow.
All 20 channels.
Wow.
So if you ever get around a Spectra console, you'll notice you put your hands on it, it's cold.
Right.
It's not heating a room.
Save money on air conditioning too.
Dill used to talk about how they had to oversize when and I'm not going to name names. People know who they are, but they had to put bigger HVAC systems in. And let's just use Class A for a minute.
I used to. My old MCI console was an oven.
Yeah.
It literally melted the plastic switches with the light bulbs that were in it. Just the light bulbs.
And you talk Class A, 80% of the consumption of a Class A circuit is heat. 80%.
Right.
So it will sound different in the morning than it does in the afternoon because transistors are not stable when temperature's involved.
Yeah.
They'll flow more current through the juncture. And so what happens is you don't have a stable circuit. It's all over the place. But our stuff is ice cold. And there's another interesting thing. When we started to do SMD a few years ago, and because we wanted to put more capability in one chassis. So we wanted to have to get everything a lot smaller. So our new circuits are about a quarter the size of the original 101s and 110s.
Yeah.
We tried to use SMD transistors, and they met spec, but they ran hot. So we had an oscillation issue somewhere. And we had to go back to the through-hole transistors from 1970. And fortunately, we have tens of thousands of these transistors because you have to match certain transistors to get it to work. Bottom line is you can't SMD that circuit and have temperature stability. You just can't do it. But that's why old Spectra gear typically just needs a new electrolytic capacitor. That's all it needs to rebuild it. They don't degrade with time with heat. And they're essentially a missile circuit.
Right.
And the original designs, I've got 2 or 3 inches.
When you say an old circuit, you're talking about like 60s. I've got a
60s.
bunch of Spectra stuff and it's operating like it was straight brand new again.
Right. Well, 60s. And the group that designed this were missile engineers, Minuteman Missile. And they did MTBF, was mean time between failure, with missile circuits. Mm-hmm. Well, I've got graph charts on the 101 and the 110, mostly 101, that showed temperature. They had the room temperature, 70 degrees as a reference, and then they curved all the transistors and see how stable they were. Mm-hmm. That's how those circuits were designed. They were designed not to fail.
Yeah.
And so there's not a stability issue. And Dilly used to use the term DC stability of 1, which means it can't thermally run away with heat. It just stays the same. Well, conventional audio gear, you can't say that because the temperature is going to cause the transistor to behave in different ways. And we're not even part of that scenario. Yeah. So it's a different way of thinking, but the bottom line is we don't, on mic and line level, you don't need to heat the room. Now, power amps, you get into a whole different argument on that.
Right.
But on a lot of these consoles, I mean, when Roy Cicala called me before he passed, and we were starting to build little console modules for him, he was into Class A transistors over $100 a piece for a certain company. And he said, I'm going broke because they'd last a month or two and then burn up. And so, and he said, my record plant desk sounded way better than this anyway. And he's the one that convinced us to build mic pre's again. We weren't going to build them, but he was relentless. He kept calling me.
I remember, I think you told that.
Yeah, he calling me. First I didn't know who he was, which was really dumb on my part.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
Well, he calls up and he says, "This is Roy Cicala," and he could tell by my response that I didn't know who the hell Roy Cicala was. And he says, "Cicla. I'll call you back in 5 minutes." So I look at him and go, "Holy shit! What did I do to myself?" And he's laughing and he says, "You got to build mic pre's again." And he went through the whole history of record plant. I knew about it, but I didn't know about him. Being Lennon's engineer and then you look up Record Plant New York and you look at all the stuff that went through that place. Just the recordings and the albums. And even Record Plant LA, even though the Spectra desk didn't get a lot of accolades because of, the final mixes being done on a competitor, all the tracking was done on Spectra. And so, but that's how we got in the mic pre business was Roy.
That's wild, man.
Yeah. And he called me for 6 months every week. I hate to bother you. This is Roy. Are you going to build a mic pre? And
that's hilarious.
So that's how it started because we were just going to build 610s. That's all we were going to build.
Well, I've noticed with my Spectra gear, the C610s, the STX modules, they if I just touch them when they've been on, they just never feel hot, Whereas I've got other stuff that it's just cooking in my rack.
Mm-hmm.
There's some of my gear, even I have old converters that still sound great for the interface. But if I'm not using Pro Tools, I literally turn them off because they will heat up the room. Right. They're so hot,
Right.
So it's smart to have a clever design that doesn't need all that.
There's no reason to. You're just doing voltage.
Yeah.
There's no reason to do power.
Hey, before we got rolling too, you started telling me some funny stories that were kind of cool about. There's just such a history of artists that have worked with Spectra and Spectra Sonics in the past. And I was surprised when you brought up Michael Jackson's name too.
Right.
Wasn't there he was using some of the stuff at one point too?
Well, he had the most expensive console ever built.
Wow.
From Spectra at that point. It was 1975. It was we got to back up a little bit. Our early consoles were all discrete.
Mm-hmm.
up till about 1971, 72. And then we had, because our competitors had discovered ICs, which were originally made for instrumentation, NASA, they had discovered that they'd pass audio signal. So all of a sudden, our consoles were overpriced. And so that's when Dilly came up with the 1024 console.
Which is what you started this interview with. You mentioned the 1024.
Yeah, the 1024 came out in 72. We've got the original one in our shop, the one we're trying to finish. And the issue came up, they had to cut cost. So all the critical stages in a 1024 are discrete. Now, the one we're custom building right now, it's all discrete. There's no ICs in that thing at all. In fact,
which is like my STX 100D is an all discrete.
All discrete. There's no ICs. But the 1024, which sounds phenomenal, has a 110 on the front end, and then there's ICs on the secondary.
What's the signal flow like on a 1024? There's a mic pre. There's you've got level adjustment, pan EQ or something.
Yeah, it's a 3-band.
3-band EQ.
3-band EQ, and it's the
and compression built into the board or no?
No, we did that a few times, but that wasn't a standard issue.
Okay. All right.
But the 1024, when it came out in 74, 75, was about 54,000.
Wow.
For 24 channels.
24 channels, wow.
Yeah, 54. And he built dozens of those. Well, Michael Jackson wanted the ultimate. So he had a 1024 built in it, and we can't find it. We don't know where it is.
Wow.
In fact, his friend Todd.
How many channels do you think it was?
It was 24.
Oh, it was 24.
I saw the invoice, 98,000 in 75.
Wow.
Which is
that's a lot.
400,
that's a
500
big investment. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember seeing it was all discrete. But the console, again, we had his good friend Todd Fisher, who was they did a lot of production work together. He's even looked for it. We don't know where it went.
Wow.
But in any case, it was all discrete, and that was the cost. The console, the record plant desk, which was 30 channels in 1969, that was 97,000.
Amazing.
So Dilly you bought Spectra, you were spending the money.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not an inexpensive.
And they were getting it because it was the sound. It was the one.
The sound, and then they were getting 100, 200 an hour. The economy has changed entirely, you know. I look at what they were charging, the rates they were charging. I mean, and I understand, again, this is off hearsay. I'm not saying it's apt, but there was even a cocaine tray on the record plant desk. Yeah. Yeah, there was a little stainless steel tray on it. Naughty boys.
Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing, working with professional-grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, rock stars. We're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Bill Cheney, joining us from Spectra 1964. Bill, are you ready to jam, dude?
Yes, sir.
So we were talking about some fun things. Michael Jackson, that was hilarious. I've got an interview coming up with the author of a book about the church studio, which was Leon Russell's place in, I think, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I think you even mentioned that something like he had a console.
Yeah, I believe he did. He was on our user list as far as our brochures.
Wow.
Leon Russell Productions.
Wild.
Yeah.
It's such a history of people using your stuff, and it's so amazing that you brought the company back.
Well, the problem is Dilly didn't care about the customers. He just wanted to fly his jets. Okay, he just wanted a way to provide.
He had jets. He would fly a jet.
I think he had 7 or 8 de Havilland Vampires he restored.
Good Lord.
In fact, the one that I had a
Havilland Vampire was the name of the
de Havilland Vampires. They came out in the late 40s.
Wow.
Anyway, he restored one that I got when the FAA finally allowed him to take people up. I was allowed to go in for a ride. And that particular Vampire won the 2015 Reno Air Races open class jet. And everybody's going, Vampires don't go 505 miles an hour. Well, he'd modified it. He'd done a dilly to it. And so I think the top on a Vampire is 450. And anyway, it won the air race.
Wow.
Because a buddy of mine was there, and he said he recognized the WGD on the tail, William G. Dilley on the tail. And Bill had passed away in 2003, and this guy bought the jet and actually beat all the open class jets.
That's hilarious. Wow.
But the funny part was he built another jet, another Vampire that was all composites. And one of my buddies who was working some of the classified projects for the Air Force, they built a composite version, and it weighed less full of fuel than the one I got to ride in, empty. Unfortunately, it got damaged and it hasn't flown recently. But Bill, I think, had 5 or 6 Vampires.
Wow.
But that's what he would do. And he would sit in his hangar all day long and rebuild jets and update them. And he had all the spare Rolls-Royce engines for the Vampires. But he was a test pilot and a pilot that was his first love. Yeah, so he didn't keep track. I mean, I sat at my desk. There was a gold record for Tom Dowd right above my head. I never even bothered to look at it. You know, all the Aretha records.
Because Bill he wasn't focused on that.
It wasn't a big deal. And all the early Cream, Vanilla Fudge, Creedence, all that stuff was on this plaque from Atlantic. I had no clue. We never talked about it. This is when,
because you were there as a young guy.
Yeah, 22.
Learning under Bill.
Yeah. But it was not a big deal who was using our gear.
So what was the focus of what you were doing in the company at that point? It was still audio, but
sound
it was
reinforcement.
But it just wasn't. It wasn't a focus.
He'd given up on recording because what happened was automation was being brought in, and automation used VCAs to control the levels.
Right.
And he says, I hate to swear, I'll be goddamn if I'm going to lose 10 dB on my noise number to take care of these people because they want to be lazy. Right. That's what he basically told me. Yeah. And I think we had Seals and Crofts call one day, and they didn't have a budget. They just wanted a console that was automated. He says, don't call me. I'm not doing it. Don't call me back.
What a fascinating thing. So, and what I see is, when you zoom out enough over perspective over time, you see that solving the quality of audio issues, what you guys were doing there.
Right.
Going in, but then the tech changes, but then sometimes those changes are temporary. So the automation was a big deal until we got into computers.
Right.
And while automation is still a big deal in the big consoles, it's in the computer land, it's like that solves it. All of a sudden, it's like you're automating.
And plus, it's motorized faders too, which got rid of that issue. But
so in other words, like the audio quality is back again as relevant because now automation stuff is solved by the computers and Pro Tools, et cetera, or whatever you're using. But you really long for that quality of sound again.
Yeah.
With that.
And the other thing is phase shift. We were specifying phase shift in a console in 1969, and we guaranteed less than 1 degree of phase shift to 100 kilohertz. Now everybody's going, so what? Well, in our gear now, we still don't have essentially any phase shift. And so when you start mixing and you have a device that all of a sudden has 30 degrees of phase shift, like an 1176, all of a sudden your low end goes away. You start doing the mix. What happened to my low end? Well, it's phase shift. But we were specifying things back then which had relevance to the final product. But
so even a C610 doesn't bring in the phase shift?
No.
Oh, that's interesting. No. So if we were mixing through a Spectra mixer using C610s for our comp limiters and Spectra EQs, we're respecting the phase shift as well, which means that the whole mix is going to hold together as we
holds up when you mix it.
Oh man, I can't wait to get that whole rig going.
I've had commentary where people on a Spectra desk, no EQ, just mix the stems, and all of a sudden the low end's there.
Yeah,
they brought it through another desk, brand A or brand B, the low end drops out.
Well, it's one of the things I've noticed about doing mixes when I would be at Bonnaroo, and I would record the microphones. I wasn't on a Spectra desk. I was on a variety of them, but I would record microphones through an analog board, straight mix down to 2-track, and there would be a quality of sound that I couldn't get if I was breaking those out into multi-track and then remixing it through, all the kind of usual things that I might have done. You felt like you're sort of clawing your way back to a sound where...
and that issue can be in plugins also.
Right, exactly.
And so...
speaking of which, you guys now have a plugin that's pretty amazing, or you've teamed up with
Audio Punks.
Yeah.
And they get most of the accolades. I mean, I was hesitant to even do a plugin for years. I mean, I had not a lot, but a few people approached me for a plugin, and they said, "Well, you can make money." I said, "Yeah, but it's got to sound like our gear."
Yeah.
I said, "That's criminal to tell somebody they're going to get a C610 and it sounds like something entirely different." So we were really quite, hesitant to do it. And my first standard rule was, if they can't explain to me how they think the circuit works, I'm really not interested.
Right.
And
you wanted to work with a company that understood what they were helping you build.
And also understood why it was important to us to have something that sounds like a 610. And these folks, Audio Punks, approached us, and I got on a phone conversation. I said, "Okay, explain to me how you think it works." And they basically gave me a review, and I said, "You're pretty dang close. I mean, that's good. That's good." And then when they told me they were working with Chad Blake, I said, "Well, that makes it easier for you guys, because that kind of..."
Yeah.
Because we absolutely think the world of Chad Blake.
Yeah, Chad's awesome. He's got the ears, that's for sure.
He's a genius. And so when I found out Chad was involved, but I told them, I said, "This is not going to be easy because of our bandwidths." I mean, people don't understand how fast our stuff is.
Yeah.
They're always happy to get to 20 kilohertz. Okay? When you bring up 4 million cycles, not 20,000 cycles, that brings a whole different meaning to what...
Is 4 million 4 mega?
4 megacycle.
Okay.
Internal bandwidths. I mean, we deal with excessive... That's why we have to hand match certain parts, because of our speed. And that's why things sound so crisp and so fast, and because we've got high internal speeds. But you have to take care of, when you're building the stuff, that you do certain things. There's been people over the... Flickinger comes to mind. I mean, they copied our stuff. They were dealers originally, copied our stuff. Sounded like Spectra. Yeah. Wasn't stable.
Interesting.
When you got those kind of bandwidths, you got to deal with oscillations in the inaudible range, which you can't hear, which will chew up power and possibly catch on fire. And so when we originally bought Spectra Sonics, I got a box of blue boards, and they were all Flickinger boards, and they were all burned up. And they turn them in like, these are supposed to be Spectra Sonics boards, and they were these ugly blue boards that didn't look like anything like our stuff. But the point is, when you're talking about those kind of speeds, you've got to make sure you have a stable circuit. Yeah. And that's how you get into the quick overload recovery, things like that.
That's fascinating.
But these guys, and I told them, I'm not going to tell you specifically, there's an NDA involved, but I said, this is where you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with digital, and even though digital's fast, it ain't that fast.
Right.
And I said, just do the math, what we're dealing with. So I told them what we were going to have problems with. I told them possible ways around it, and they took them almost 2 years. And I guess they told me they're ready to quit twice. And then all of a sudden things started to click, and then we got down to a couple of issues, and I said, well, try this, this, and this. And like 2 weeks later, said, we're going to introduce it. Like, it went. But then we had a group of 610 users evaluate it, the beta. Because I said, I don't want to do this unless it sounds. And they called me and said, this shocks me. This thing sounds like. Now, it's never going to be as fast as our limiter.
So where would we notice that? Would we notice?
Well, you can't. You can't use it where you would notice it, because it would be in tracking on the front end. Right. It would be the first amplifier stage. Right. Well, you got an A to D converter between you and the world, so you're never going to have that. So because we have the buffer in
using it as a mixing effect, then the computer can sort of like forward think.
Right. Having said that, it's still fast as hell.
Yeah.
I mean,
all I notice is when you use it, it just sounds great.
Yeah.
So like, for example, and to watch some of the videos where Chad demonstrates it on drums was really encouraging for me to see, because it reminded me, oh yeah, be bold with this thing, be bold, like really crank some stuff up. And what was cool is using it as a plug-in. Well, in tracking, using it as an input module, an actual C610 is an amazing sound. But a lot of times, we make decisions about things and we sort of set it,
right.
And then we're a little bit conservative and we're like,
right,
don't change it again for a little while. But in the plugin world, it's like you can really like, well, what happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? And so it was really fun to like
you can do
experiment. I kind of wish I had a hardware controller board so I could grab all the knobs at once. That would be a really cool way to use it and interact with it.
Well, I had a famous producer call me, and I didn't know he even bought it. And he owns a lot of 610s, and he said, "This thing's amazing." He said, "I'm putting them on every track." Yeah. He says, "I can't believe how fast it is, and how accurate it is."
Yeah.
But everybody that we put on that list, and it's people around here, most of the Nashville area, they all had 610s, been using 610s for years. They all said, "Go with it.
Yeah,
it works."
Yeah.
And so then we finally said, "Okay, we'll do it."
Yeah, it's great. I mean, sometimes I started putting it on everything, and then I'm like, am I putting it on too much? Am I using, because we get a little bit gun shy with plugins sometimes because we get so excited, and then we tend to overuse them. But so far, I'm like, I don't know, it just sounds great. And if I can put it on a vocal, I can put it on an acoustic guitar, I can put it on a bass, I can put it on a drums.
And it helps sell hardware killer. Because they say if this thing's in the $100 range, if it sounds that good, what does the hardware sound?
The hardware sounds amazing.
And so it's a good entry point if you're wondering, do I really want to buy a 610? I mean, try the plug-in, because I get a lot of calls. They say, well, I'm just shocked at how good. But I would almost say that we're almost, even though it's digital, we're almost as fast as anybody else's limiter,
mm-hmm.
and it's digital.
Yeah.
So they deserve the kudos. I mean, they were the ones that stuck with it, and they understood what they were up against. But they did a great job.
Let me see. I'll show it off a little bit more here. Just got to pull it back up on the screen. All right, so. Yeah, they've got a nice little video.
Now, the bottom 610, that's Chad Blake's. It's got a little story behind that bottom one.
The bottom one. Oh, you mean in the video image?
Yeah, the video is Chad's.
Oh, there's two.
That one right there.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's Chad's. And
oh, yeah, right.
Years ago, Chad sent us an email because he was really tight-lipped about using 610s. And about 10, 12 years ago, he sent me a letter.
There you go, you can see
and he said, I use them on everything. And he basically he came clean about using 610s. And I sent it off to John down at Tape Op, the publisher. And I said, does this look like this is real? And he says, Chad Blake doesn't say stuff like that.
Right.
He's not going to. And then John calls me back and says, that's Chad Blake's email. He says, ask him if he'll let you print that. I said, so I did. He said, of course, that's why I sent it to you. But when Chad started talking about using 610s in the studio, and I can always tell if he's got an important project anywhere in the world because I'll get a phone call from a studio that says, I need a pair of 610s next week. Cheryl Crow, whoever, I need a pair of 610s.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of his go-to. But without Chad's help, the 610 wouldn't be anything it was, is today.
Yeah. Well, he's got so much experience using it. He knows what it's supposed to be doing.
He knows what he's doing. And that thing I was telling you about, the release control, that's all Chad Blake.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, back to that.
And so you can choose the modern or the classic, or I don't remember how it's named.
Let's talk about that second unit. That second unit is not the classic. That thing's sick, okay?
Like it's got a sound.
It's got a sound. And I offered after, because I found out he had 6 of these, and he said he'd taken them all over the world, and they'd been dropped off planes, and he said they all still work. Yeah. And then he started talking about this one 610 he's got. And I said, well, I'll be glad to recap it. No, you can't touch it. You leave it alone. Whatever it's doing, I like it. Well, that's what he's modeled here.
Right.
It's a unique 610. We have an idea. We think what's going on, but we don't know for sure. But that is the second, Chad Blake presets. That's 610.
That's cool. Hey, rock stars, writing and recording your next great song just got a whole lot easier with Complete 15 from Native Instruments. This powerful toolkit gives you everything from deep sound design to instant musical ideas. Contact 8 introduces creative features like the new Chords tool, letting you generate and customize compelling chord progressions without needing to know music theory, making it perfect for songwriting. And the Phrases tool helps you find fresh melodic lines on the spot. With over 165 instruments and more than 150,000 sounds, Massive X, battery, and Guitar Rig 7 Pro, you've got everything you need to create in any genre. You can shape your ideas into real music fast. Whether you're sketching an idea or finishing a full production, Complete 15 keeps you in the creative flow from first note to final mix. Add your Complete Control keyboard or machine hardware to the mix for seamless integration and hands-on control. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. And it's got a different sound and it's cool.
Oh, it's probably
it's fun to listen to.
It's funny, but I can't touch it. He won't let me touch it.
But I'll be honest, I mean, just the modern version or the correct one that you modeled with the black knobs, I mean, it sounds great on stuff. So I'm never using it and thinking, oh, geez, I wish it was just
on the
more
bottom,
messed up sounding or something.
On the Chad Blake specials, the fidelity is compromised in our words. But
it's because we get into that space of trying to change a sound or get it to be more distorted and things like that. That sometimes that can be cool, or perhaps a version like Chad's version might be darker on something, and we might prefer that in a particular.
Oh, there's a need for it, and that's where Dilly and I parted ways a few times as far as opinion. He said if it changed the waveform at all, it was an effect. Mm-hmm. It was a sound.
Yeah,
and that's where the 610s and our mic pre's and everything really excel is how they overload.
Yeah.
And how they sound when you overdrive them. But no, it's a great plug-in, and I don't think anybody would be disappointed when they try one.
Well, let's see. Maybe we can. I've pulled up some other tabs just to talk about stuff, and I know a bunch we've already talked about, but maybe we can give a shout out to some of these other things too. Okay, so now we're seeing this is the STX 100. Oh, and then you got one right next to you. You want to just show it off on the camera too?
Right, yeah, this is.
So if you just kind of hold it in front of you. Now, here's the thing. This camera will focus on your eyes. So if you really want it to focus on the STX, it's either right there or it's like right up close in front, blocking your eyes. Yeah.
No, the 100, we're into this thing where we say you can have a 1024 console, but it's in a 500 format.
Yeah.
Because realistically, if you can find a Spectra console right now, they're all six-figure.
Right.
They're just not. When we first bought the business, you could buy a console for $10,000, and then all of a sudden everybody realized what they were and what they are, and we get calls all the time, and there are not that many that survived. And they're all well in six figures if you can find one.
Yeah.
But the 100 is the 1024 circuit, console circuit. Mm-hmm. The 100D, which is the black one, that's all discrete.
I can pull that one up too. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up. I don't know when to show.
But anyway, that's fine. The 100, that's fine. The 100D is just black. It's all discrete 101s.
Yeah, there we go. And it's great. And I've got a pair right behind me here.
And it's got transformers in and out.
And the way I think about them is the 100s. They both sound amazing. So the 100s, I think about them as really sounding like this. I don't know, the detail on the top end and everything is coming through. And the 100Ds bring in this, they can sometimes feel a little darker and
Stax
kind of
sound.
Yeah, in a cool harmonic richness kind of way,
right. And that's the Stax sound.
Yeah.
And a lot of my Americana guys prefer the 100s. But having said that, I have had very few drummers that didn't pull the 100 versus the guitars, vocals go to 100D.
Yeah.
So the percussionists almost all go for the 100.
I think I've had the 100D on my vocal chain for quite a while, and also on the guitars.
Right. And that's where they
because it'll sometimes like smooth off the top edge on a guitar.
Right.
And then if you don't want that, I just switch to the 100.
Just to go to the 100.
But I feel like the 100 also brings the mids forward if you want them to, if you want to have that kind of.
Well, it's got twice the voltage swing. I mean, it's got a lot more going on. Now, again, this is the 100's the 1020 console, and that goes back to that circuit goes back to 1965.
Yeah.
And then we do pair it, and we don't have that listed right here right now, but we also have the 2-band EQ that went with that circuit.
Right. The 500? 500. Yeah.
And so that pairs with it, or pairs with the 100, the standard 100D. But again, that's supposed to be the 1020 console, and then you get. I'm not sure I've even got. I think I have it listed. But
so here's the 500.
That's the EQ,
right?
And that one was difficult.
Which is, what's the name for this kind of EQ where you just have the high and the low? That's not the same thing as Baxandall.
It's 5 frequencies. Yeah, that one will do four frequencies each side. But those are unique in that we put the EQ in the feedback loop, and so it's not susceptible to distortion. If you dial up plus 12, it puts out plus 12. But that EQ was designed in 1965, 66, and that's the EQ that Stax had.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a 2-band.
Stax got a mention.
But to get the inductors to meet spec, we had to work with Cinemag a little bit, and the switches are the same switches they used, the Gray Hills.
Yeah, they're really solid.
In fact, when we first started building them, the women who built the original switches saw the order come through, and they were building them. They were still working at Gray Hill in Chicago. And they all said, we used to build these. Never had one fail. Even the old ones, we've never had one fail. But they're a $100 switch. And that's what kind of pushes the price of some of our stuff up. If we used an offshore switch for $5, but you're going to be calling me in a few years.
Yeah, the switches are fascinating. I mean, they're such great looking. Yeah, the switch you're talking about is internally, I'm sure.
Right.
But even just the knobs and the look and the design is so cool.
Yeah.
And then these ones, whoops, not that one. Here we go. The 100s.
Yeah.
You can really, it's easy to see what's going on. Now the 100Ds, you did something nice for me. I asked, hey, can you, because it's this great black look.
Yeah.
But I asked it, hey, can you put a little white marker on these? And that really helped a ton too. Yeah.
Your old eyes, right? You're giving away your age when you have to have markers put on it.
Yeah.
But those, again, are custom extruded aluminum knob.
Yeah, and then, of course, you got a pad switch on them here, too. Right. And then you got the phantom, so you can turn on phantom power and then a phase reverse. Did you ever consider sort of like a 1/4-inch DI input on any of these designs, too?
We have, but it gets to be real estate.
Right.
And you want to have an input transformer, and it's...
there we go. Here's the solution for that.
But, yeah, it gets into how much can you put in the box. And you need another transformer.
Yeah.
High impedance transformer, and it just gets to real estate.
Do you want to give a shout out to the BBDI here?
Yeah, again, what we did with this is we wanted a for better term, colored DI. We don't want it to hype any particular frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't. And we wanted to handle a lot of input level, like plus 18.
Mm-hmm.
But we wanted something that was flat. The distortion on it, 004, 20 to 20, 005. I mean, it's just, but having said that, the studio musicians love them. The touring,
it's great for bass too.
It just handles all kinds of level.
And you don't, and with this combo of like the BBDI and the C610, whoops, that's the plug-in. And I just can't remember which tab I'm looking at here. Maybe this one. Nope, maybe this one. There you go, sorry. The BBDI into the C610, not needing a mic preamp for the C610, you can actually get a killer bass sound.
Oh yeah,
it's just that combo.
It's and that's what caused it to be developed. Was I'd get phone calls. I need a DI.
Yeah,
and I was saying, well, Radio makes a pretty good box, Countryman, but there wasn't one that I considered to be flat, low distortion. There just wasn't one. And so that's why we came up with our own DIs but having said that, the live guys occasionally don't want it that clean.
Right. Interesting.
I can attribute it to a couple of things, but I'm not going to say anything, but it's just they don't want you to hear everything. Okay, because if there's an imperfection in the source, you're going to hear it.
Right. Some players, maybe the technique needs certain parts of the technique, like a finger attack on something, might need to be hidden because of how it's being played.
But it's not.
But I feel like the C610 brings that into play too, because it actually takes the transient out of something.
Right, and it's like 1 out of 20.
Yeah.
I mean, I have failed maybe. I put number of fingers on my hand is how many times someone didn't like it.
Right.
Okay, and maybe 3. But going back to the 610 with the peak limiting and even this DI is, the pops and clicks you get off of hot pickups, gone.
Yeah.
You can be as aggressive as you want, and you're not going to hear, because it's so fast, it's going to strip that voltage.
Right, because it's taking care of that peak when it comes through.
I mean, that thing is so fast, you can drop a microphone. Not that you want to damage a microphone. We used to do this demo when I first started there. Just drop it and hit on stage. And normally you drop the woofers out of your cabinets, and it just goes poof. It doesn't do anything. It's so quick. Another test, if you want to do it with our gear versus others, is just get car keys and get a good hot condenser mic.
Yeah.
And rattle them in front of that microphone, and you're lucky to get minus 20 out of a conventional mic pre because of the peaks coming off of the car keys. Our stuff, you'll hear the car keys, no problem. Cymbals
with the C610, you're saying?
Yeah, or with the mic pre's. The STX 100.
Yeah,
it'll still reproduce it.
Yeah, that's wild.
Mark Neal did that one day for me. He says, "I bet you've never seen this before." And we had one of my mic pre's, and he got his car keys out. I said, "So what?" He has watched this, and I can't remember what he's plugged into.
And I haven't tried that yet.
An old Studer or something, and it's just crunching and cracking and popping. So that's what I do if someone doesn't believe me.
Well, the place I feel like I experience that is on a tambourine truck.
You hear tambourines like they're supposed to be.
This crunch that happens on a tambourine.
Mandolins. I mean, you get a lot of that stuff where you've never heard it before. It's like the bass guitar player. I was telling you about that Marilyn Manson album.
Yeah.
Not Marilyn Manson. It was, I'm trying to think of the other name. But anyway, they could hear it on the album when they did the mix. Norma Jean. It was the Norma Jean album. That's the guys that did the whole album, did the last song with the limiter.
But I think you did mention that Marilyn Manson was your...
Yeah, that was a different situation. Shooter Jennings got a hold of us, and
that's great.
He was doing the last album with him. I don't know if it's his last album, but this was years ago. And he called me. He says, "I understand your mic pre's don't clip." And I said, "No, they don't clip." And he goes, "Well, I got a problem." And he told me about they were trying to do some vocal tracks. I said, "Well, I'll send you a 100D and an EQ." And he called back about 2 weeks later. Says, "Yep, it worked fine. Couldn't get it to clip." First time he's ever heard himself, without clipping.
That's funny.
But he said, "I clipped every mic pre in the studio." I said, "Well, we won't. We'll handle it. You got plenty of range." So those kind of phone calls are really reassuring because it just proves what we've been talking about, just in application.
Well, when it comes to rock and roll, those guys definitely know.
Oh yeah,
they know what good sound is.
Yeah,
I mean, that was one of Mechanical Animals. I had done an interview with Michael Beinhorn, who produced that, and that was just one of those records that just like opened my eyes and ears to what sounds could be on a record.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
that was years ago. That was late 90s before that.
Well, and that's where tube mic pre's kind of had relevance because they didn't overload as badly.
Yeah,
and that's why it's warm or it's this but it wasn't overloading from the peaks because the circuit is typically so slow that it can't respond to the peak overload.
Right,
and that's why tube guitar amps sound better.
Yeah.
And they're putting out all this level with 5 watts. You can't do that with a transistor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're down 20 because of the peaks.
Yeah. Now, do you have you found an interaction, because I know there's a history of some blues players that play through solid state guitar amps and stuff like that really appreciated that. Have you found some interaction with certain guitarists and styles where they really appreciate that keeping of the peak with Spectra? Anything that comes to mind?
Not the musicians, engineers. I hear from them.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to too many musicians with that regard.
The musicians are probably choosing the amp that they're going to play through. Anyway.
Right, and a lot of it depends on the type of pickup they're using, how hot the pickup is. That's the peak to average is affected by those hot outputs, and so that you'd hear it there.
And you guys are in that sound reinforcement. That's how you started.
Yeah,
so that ability to, as you discussed, have the transient of a mandolin translate to the sound reinforcement to the PA.
Yeah, our power amps, which we've dialed in, I do them on a custom basis, but our little 20 watt, 25 watt power amp will keep up with a kilowatt.
Right, and we discussed this before. I think Matt Rossbang put the power amps in his.
He's Triumph Spectra.
Yeah,
but if you figure you got a power amp that'll put out 20 dB more because of the peaks, you don't need a lot of power. Now in fairness, his is like 500-600 watts a channel of Triumph Spectra Sonics power.
Right.
That's immense.
It's a monster.
130 plus.
Yeah.
130. But the accuracy, but our power amps never clipped with peaks either. So, Earth, Wind, and Fire traveled with us, I think, 700 amplifier modules. That was their touring system.
Wow.
That was their touring system was 700 modules. But again, that's the peak overload, the headroom. You're buying a kilowatt on a power amp for the peaks. If you do the math on a 20 dB peak with a 1,000 kilowatt amp, you're only capable of getting maybe 10 watts out of it under peak overload. It's 20 dB, 100 times. And so they're buying these huge amounts of power and just for the peaks.
Hey, rock stars, when it's time to finish your music, Isotope Ozone 12 gives you the powerful new tools to master with confidence. The new bass control helps you balance your low end, EQ, sustain, and punch so that your tracks translate everywhere. Unlimiter restores clarity and impact to overcompressed mixes, and Stem EQ lets you rebalance vocals, drums, and bass using only the stereo mix file. When it's time to push loudness, Ozone's new IRC5 Maximizer delivers clean and powerful competitive masters that stay open and musical. And with an updated mastering assistant that guides, not decides, you can move faster, make better decisions, and stay fully in control from start to finish. Go to isotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Let's do this. So there's one more thing I wanted to look at too. But before we go, would you mind? You can actually even just show us on your STX 100, which is right next to you. But you've talked about how to set that up for input, and I thought it might be cool to do it as a visual real quick. And if you want to just sort of hold that up towards the camera.
And this happened in a demo we did with another well-known band years ago, and we did some recordings, and
there you go. Yeah.
We shot against a 1073 or a clone or whatever, and they sounded remarkably the same as ours. And I'm going, we should be better. So I started looking at how they set it up. Input stage, because the input stage is your dynamic range of any device.
Yeah.
The higher you get it, less clipping, the more dynamic range you can have, the further you are away from the noise floor. So you always want to have that first stage at a maximum. Second stage is less critical. It's the first stage. That's your signal-to-noise ratio. So what we tell people to do is when we're setting the input, we want that red light to flash occasionally. And you still got 4 dB, 3 to 4 dB.
And that's that top one you're pointing at right there.
You just want to have that occasionally.
And just hold that up high.
Occasionally flash.
We'll see it for sure. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where the the second knob, the bottom knob set, the second gain stage. But
well, it will, if you get the overload light flashing
on the output,
then it doesn't sound great.
Right. That's the clipping.
Yeah.
On the output side. You don't want the second stage to be,
right.
peaking. But the
that first stage, you
that's
can hit that.
Exactly correct.
And that's called an overload light as well.
Right. Right.
But the input one, in that case, you're getting a little bit of that. Is that what you were referring to earlier on where you said you get a tiny bit of the RMS harmonic?
Well, what's happening there is it's not quite clipping.
Yeah.
Okay, you're still 3 dB down from clipping. Now, like I've got a lot of customers that actually have that almost on constant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they just dig
they
that
just
sound,
yeah. That's not where I'm telling you to go. I'm just saying that just occasional flashes, you're maximizing the signal noise ratio and getting away from the noise floor. The second output, I mean, this thing will do plus 20.
Yeah, I think
and meet spec. If you're clipping the output stage of this year, plus 22.
Yeah.
Way beyond what we spec this thing to plus 18. I mean, it's really going. But it meets the distortion spec at plus 20 out. I mean, it's just ridiculous how much headroom this thing has. Mm-hmm. But yeah, because of the circuit on the second stage, it's going to not sound as friendly as the
So just to reiterate one more time, that input knob, you're going to turn it up until that top light, maybe point at it one more time.
It's going to be this
is
light.
Giving you a little flashing. And then if your input signal is just way too hot or something, then you use the pad switch
Use the pads and optimize.
And just crank up the input knob even more.
I always like to see the inputs between 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock.
Oop, you're a little off camera there, over to the side. Yeah, there you go.
Between 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And it goes for the C610s. It goes for any of our stuff between 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock.
Uh-huh.
A standard potentiometer is not linear in this area.
Oh, in the lowest range or the highest. Oh, okay.
They're always meeting spec here. Okay?
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
and so the impedance changes if you go on either end of this. So I'm always telling people live between 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock.
Interesting. So that would be that's brand new. So that's a really cool concept. So that means if you could still get the light to flash, but your input knob was way down low or way up high, and the pad will allow you to get in
that's where you want to live in
upper, closer to 12 o'clock or something range. That'd be preferable sonically.
Yeah, on the old 610s, I remember measuring them when we first started building them, and they were like 450 ohms.
Okay.
On a 600 ohm pot.
Okay.
Because I'd watch the distortion on the analyzers just go, and that was what I was fighting. Was that these things are not linear outside of those ranges.
Interesting.
But that's how you set those up.
And then let me see here. I got one more.
We want to talk about the 600, I think, because that's kind of become that's become a very popular box.
So let me see if I can get that going. Okay, here we go. So this is the 600 STX 600,
right?
And I've got a couple of these in the studio, and been using them steadily. I've used them on guitars at times. I've used them. I currently have them on a couple of kind of ambient room mics on the drums, where it's like you can kind of crank up the sound a little more, because these have. Tell us what's in these, but essentially it's a mic pre and the comp limiter, right?
Yeah, it's the same circuit as a 610 as far as the input transformer and the 601 comp limiter module. So it's the same circuit. And so what it is it's got a fixed slope and release. And how we came upon that setting was we started to realize that in tracking, probably 80% of the time, there were particular settings, 2 o'clock on the release and about 2 o'clock on the slope.
Interesting. Okay.
That's, Dave Cobb, Matt Rossbang, these guys, that's where they were living about 80% of the time. Now, when they got into wanting to play games with a bass guitar, they'd extend the release time.
Yeah.
Like Jake Sinclair, those guys, they'll extend the release time on the bass.
Yeah.
But for tracking in that, they were using these 2 fixed sites. So we're going, okay, we're going to fix it. And so I built a little prototype, and I sent it to Dave and a few of the others, and they said it did everything that they would want. It would track a bass guitar. The release time was fine. We set it up to where it would basically any musical instrument will operate in that range.
Oh, cool.
The advantage is setup and cost. The setup is really quick because you're just setting it for either peak limiting, which is occasional flashing. And if you crank it all the way open, it'll give you up to 10-to-1 compression.
Interesting.
Okay. So in tracking, that's going to get you there 9 times out of 10. Plus, it's a very affordable box.
So the speed, the default, the slope is the thing that kind of handles the attack time, or is it attack time just
It's fixed.
irrelevant?
The attack time's fixed.
But like, will we try this on drums and, notice on certain kind of things we really wish we had the C610, for example, because we want to adjust
the
faster or something like that?
Yeah, the C610, if you want to start playing games with release time, or you want more compression, and heaven forbid you need more than 10-to-1 most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you hear 100-to-1 through our C610s, and it's just lifeless. It's just smashed. But where you'd want, the other thing I hear a lot is, again, on bass guitar and even kick and snare, they like to play with the release time extended.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say 70, 80, 90% of the time, that circuit suffices. But it's when you want to get into the Chad Blake world, you want a C610.
Right, because then you can really dial in some unusual
Yeah,
sounds
the names I mentioned, they have 4 or 6 C610s, and they use them for everything. For mic pre's, but this thing also has enough gain on the makeup gain as a mic pre, so it's a 60 dB mic pre.
And it's called different. So this one is describing as threshold.
Right, and that's a wholly different circuit. That circuit is operating as fast as an oscilloscope because a standard peak light wouldn't even flash. The peak is so fast.
Mm-hmm.
The rise times are 200 or 300 nanoseconds. A peak light can't respond that fast. So it's a different kind of circuit. So when that thing occasionally flashes, you're peak limiting.
Yeah.
And as you go more clockwise with it, it's not going to do any damage. It's just going to start to compress. And you'll get to a point where that threshold light gets more and more consistent. You'll go from peak limiting to peak limiting with minor compression to all the way wide open. You'll basically be in 10-to-1 compression. So, but it sets up extremely fast. We've got customers. Well, one customer just bought 24, and it's the whole front end of his console now. It's a relatively new console.
Wow.
And that's what he tracks with, because everything in the desk now is operating a peak-free environment, and this is a well-known console, and it's a brand-new console.
There's all the specs, rock stars. If you like reading all the specs, they're there.
Yeah, there you go. But the headroom in his console now, he doesn't have to worry about peak lights.
Yeah.
Because all his mix bus, everything, because everything following those 600s is now operating peak-free. So it works like our gear. So that's become an option for, some of these desks. That was the first stage, is you just plug those in.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd be fascinated to hear all this stuff.
The customer just said it changed the way they operate totally, because they don't worry about peaks anymore.
Yeah. What are some of the, instruments that come to mind that you've heard, Chad talk about, Dave Cobb talk about, just anybody you can think of, interesting use cases for the Spectra mic pre's or the STX 600 or the C610?
Well, the point I'm making, there was a recent production, I can't be specific names, but they wanted, this album had to be part of Abbey Road.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was kind of the pitch. And he said, we got there, and he tracked 80% of it with 100s. And he said he got to Abbey Road, and
it didn't sound as good as the one.
No, so I guess they put a couple of piano tracks or something. But my point is this, is you can get console performance and not break the bank. That's the key. Yeah. I've got another customer who just bought 10 100Ds.
I've got racks of them now, and I love it. I've got a bunch of the 100Ds, but I also really love the 100s.
Yeah. Personally, I like 100s better.
Yeah.
But, that's just but he has a pretty good sized production facility in LA he owns, and he went back to the Carolinas to do some work, and he wanted a portable system, and he bought 10, and he says, I'm producing stuff better than the big studio.
Yeah.
Just with 10 100Ds in a roll-around case. So those are the stories I get a lot, is people are shocked that you can do that with a 500 series.
Yeah.
Some of my customers weren't going to allow 500 series even in the building. And then they did the demo, and that's all they have now.
Yeah.
So it's because I understand 500. 500 is when you grow up and you can afford the real stuff, you buy the other stuff.
Right.
Our attitude on 500 was it better sound so damn close to our big stuff that you can have a hard time telling the difference.
Yeah. Now, what about for those of us who might? Oh, look, there we got a. I don't know if they'll see us off the room cam right now, but we got a couple of interviews in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was I just thinking about? Oh, for those of us who have the 500 series, like maybe we've got a rack full of the STX 100s, and then we're thinking, I kind of wish I knew what it was like to have a little bit of the other part of the console, the mixer side. Is that ever on your radar too? Thinking about the the ability to create kind of a mixer or a summing kind of setup.
Yeah, we built one prototype, and it's an 8x2. And you can order either with 110s or 101s.
Oh, cool.
And so what we're doing is we're loading them initially with 101s,
Yeah.
and then the output stage is 110s. But they have transformers and that in them. Still testing it. The customer said it works great now, but we're still think we need to make a few more changes to it. But we're going to probably build 2 or 3 of these for summing mixers. But yeah, we've built one. About a year and a half ago we released it. So it's not a product yet, but it does what it's supposed to do, and there's no phase shift.
Yeah.
It's just, but you can order it, like I say, 101s and 110s, and you can upgrade it if you want to change it later. To change the amplifiers takes 5 minutes. It's not something you're stuck with, because everything we're doing now, we do all our own warranty in-house.
Now, how do we think about the difference between 101s and 110s?
Okay, again, it's the voltage swing. The 101 was brought out in 1964, and it just had a 24 volt to ground power supply.
I was looking. I don't think the 110 is listed here.
Yeah, it's not. The 110 is not a listed product. You've got prototypes.
Okay. I do. They're very cool sounding.
Yeah. You've got stuff that's not released yet. But the 101 was 24 volts to ground, and it had a maximum output of plus 18. Okay. The 110 came out in 71, 72. Again, the same front end circuit as a 101, but it had the end stage being plus or minus 24 volts. Mm-hmm. So it's 48 volts.
Okay.
So that's where you can get an amplifier that'll do plus 24, plus 26 and not click.
Now, are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Is it correct for me to think that the sound of the 110 might have a really sort of crisp isn't necessarily the right word because we're not changing sound. It's more like it's just fast, top end and frequency. So like the strum of a pick on a guitar might really read through.
Right, because of that voltage swing. You got
now, is that would that have been the design at Ardent Studios at one point? Or was
101s. They were all 101s.
Yeah, because I don't know if it's the same, if it was that record, but Big Star.
That was 101s.
Oh my God. Those guitars. And I just saw Big Star do their quintet reunion.
That was a 1020 console, essentially.
Amazing.
And it was, I believe, they had 2 consoles. Matt Respang's got the first console in restoration, but the second console was a 1020. I think that was done through a 1020, but that's 101s.
Wow. Yeah, I mean the guitars on that stuff, 13 and all those guitars.
I guess they
are just so.
They traveled
awesome
to
sounding.
Strawberry Recorders and the Chateau in Paris because they wanted to go through a different. And they got there and they realized that it was all Spectra parts. Huh. And he says, "I've traveled halfway around the world. It's the same thing as Memphis has, but that sound is pretty hard. You know, you listen to Stax, even listen to the Otis Redding stuff. That was all 101 500 EQ. That was all. That's all they did. And they didn't. They're only 12 channel, 13 channel, 14 channel boards. They're just tiny.
Yeah.
Little consoles. In fact, I just built a similar version for myself and a friend. You know, 13 channel. You know, left, center, right.
Why not?
Just, you know.
Are you making some music yourself?
No.
I didn't remember that.
No music skill at all. I'm good at listening. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you are you also like a hi-fi enthusiast? Do you sort of have a?
I used to be, and I'm getting pulled back into it because we used to build the best phono pre in the world, moving coil, and I've got a couple of the prototypes at the office, but they're called 160s, and they're modified 101s. But I shot against a $15,000 or $20,000 mic pre and smoked it. It wasn't even close. Very few of those went out, but we've actually designed a moving coil pre that may be produced next year.
Wow.
For a lot less money.
Moving coil is referring to the needle, the pickup needle, the stylus on a...
Yeah, but these are fast. They're clean, the low-end tracks.
Yeah.
But I remember Dilly, this is when I first started working with Dilly, and it was a silver-wired Mark Levinson. And I went up there with the factory, and he just wrinkled his nose. He says, they don't know what they're doing. And he says, give me a week. And he built this little custom one for this client I was working for, and it just was just astounding, the difference.
Yeah.
But it gets into ground plane and gain and all kinds of things that happen when you deal with those kind of – because an RIA curve has boost of low frequency when you play it back.
Yeah.
And if you don't handle the grounding right and the power supply regulation in that right, that's where the woofer starts modulating. That's ground current flow.
Interesting.
And so when you see our phono pre's, the woofer doesn't move. It just tracks, whatever it is. But there were, John Wayne, Debbie Reynolds, Paul Anka, they all had these custom systems built for them, these custom mic pre's. There's maybe 5 or 6 in the world. Mm-hmm. And then he built a few of these 160s. But it's one of those things we may delve into because we're trying to broaden out a little bit because the recording industry right now it's soft. Mm-hmm. It's tough right now. It's really tough. And so that's why we're going to start getting into sound reinforcement with our limiters because it makes a huge difference in a digital system. I like to run 600s at the front end. And then also maybe you delve into the mid to high end hi-fi, for a better word. Because again, it's dramatic. It's not something can you hear the difference. It's in your face. Mm-hmm. Because again, the headroom, there's no peak overload on those pre's or anything. It's just they're pure. But that's when you work around a guy like Dilly, it's really humbling because this stuff was he wasn't doing revisions. He would design it and he was done. I don't have a bunch of notes that said we changed this, we changed that. Right. Because of this,
he just tries to get it right.
Because of this problem.
Yeah.
610s basically are 610s the same.
Yeah.
Where our competitors, there's 10 versions of certain compressor limiters out there. Yeah. Which one do you have? They went through all the. It had to work on paper first, and then they built it.
Yeah.
And but it still blows your mind when you think about these guys back in a 5-year window built all this stuff.
That's wild, man.
It's just unbelievable.
That's a trip.
Lots of cigarettes and coffee. Well, I'll open up notes and they still smell like nicotine.
Wow.
I'll open up and then there's a burn mark across the notes where the cigarette, they fell asleep or something, the cigarette burned down the notes.
Wow.
But it reminds me when I went to the original factory on 770 Wall Avenue in Ogden, it was an old bar and they turned it into a factory. And you had a bunch of women with these big beehive hairdos smoking cigarettes, and there was like a 2-foot waif of smoke in the back room. And they're back, and the consoles are all on their sides. There's like 3 or 4 of them always being built. And he was putting out one a month. And all these big looms and that, and they're all NASA certified soldering. I mean, everything was done by the book.
Yeah.
You never heard the term NASA certified.
No.
Everybody that had an iron in their hand was NASA certified. And that's just the way they did things. And if you look at our old boards, they're like gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no flux on them. They're perfect.
Yeah.
They look like a missile board. I mean, they look just exactly like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Bill, what have we not covered? Anything I haven't asked
I think
you
we beat this to death. I mean, I appreciate your time. And anytime anybody wants to give me a call, I'm kind of believing a phone over. I'll do email, but I'd rather talk because you could tell we're a little different in terms of how we do things.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to get into 10 or 20 pages. I don't have that much time anyway. So it's one of those things that we're readily available by phone.
Yeah.
You have any questions?
You want to give a shout out to the number right now? You can. I mean, if it's one to share.
It's going to be.
Is it under support?
Well, it's going to. We have a couple of numbers. One of my current numbers is 801. There's several numbers that are published there.
Can I mention this one?
Well, that one, and then there's the other number I use just as much as that one is 801-726-9980.
Okay, great.
Or 801-593-9813. We've got 3 numbers, and that's the internet one right there. But
okay, really.
But just the best thing to do is email us. Bill at Spectra1964, all lowercase. Just email me, and then I'll make time for you if you want.
And
to
1964 is 1964, right?
Right.
No space in there or anything.
Right, but if Bill at lowercase Spectra1964.com. If you send me a text or an email, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
All right, groovy. Last question. We've asked you this before, but I love to ask it of all the guests. It's hypothetical. You get to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you go back in time, and you find young Bill Cheney, and you say, "Listen, dude." I'm trying. I can't think of. I can't. I don't know. I don't know tons about young Bill Cheney, so I can't crack a funny punchline about.
He wasn't very. He wasn't very.
Did he have long hair then?
No, he wasn't very refined though. He was a little bit testosterone heavy and got in a lot of trouble.
Oh, so yeah, there you go.
He's so not the same guy now.
Listen, young Bill, put down the burger. Stop dreaming about jets.
Yeah.
The audio is your future, or whatever. And you say, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. I know you didn't go into the studio yourself. You made the gear.
Right, yeah.
But maybe it's a rock star making studio gear. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
It's just you have to be patient with the fundamentals. And the biggest mistake you can make is to chase a trend.
Yeah.
I have customers call me and say, I don't know why I left your gear. In the mastering, digital mastering, they stop using their V610s. They call me on the phone. They say, I don't know why a lot of it's their wallet because they can generate more revenue with the other way. But the big thing is you stay with the fundamentals and you don't deviate and chase it. That's the biggest mistake. Fortunately, I had Dilly leaning on me, so I couldn't. Because he'd tell you exactly what he thought of you. And he usually had GD involved. The word, because he says it's all about standards.
Yeah.
And he says it's not about money, it's about standards. And he says it depends, that's who you are. And if you start getting into a situation where you start chasing a sound or you lose your direction because of these, that's such an important thing. And it's usually just basics. It's not like complicated. The things we talk about are not high-end physics. They're just common sense approaches. But then it allows you to be rather than being a technician, it allows you to be an artist. Because that's the biggest thing with our limiters when they get into the mastering and when they get into disc cutting is all of a sudden they forget the peaks and all of a sudden they're not trying to run from the peaks anymore. And it becomes secondary. They're not sitting there watching overload. And they'll say that to me almost word for now I'm an artist again.
Yeah.
I don't have to sit there or throw a plug-in at it to finesse this thing that occurred during tracking.
Yeah. And
then it makes it worse. So those are the things. And the other thing to remember is dynamic range is your friend. And especially when you start to mix, if you don't have a lot of dynamic range, you don't have a lot of options. And that can really affect the end result of what you get, the impact. I mean, you listen to some of those old recordings that were done on our gear, and it's shocking how good they were. And they were done with 16 tracks or less.
Got any favorites that you like to go listen to?
Oh, I like the old Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff.
Yeah.
A lot. I like
what
the
about
old, yes,
would that be like Brain Salad Surgery? Or
Brain Salad Surgery with Spectra.
Oh, shit. Wow.
All the Yes Fragile with Spectra.
Yeah, wow.
A lot of the Uri Bowie.
Yeah.
Elton John, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, and Chateau, the Chateau recording.
Wow.
That was all Spectra.
Wow.
Now, when they went to Yellow Brick Road that same year, you listen to the fidelity difference. It's a competitor of ours, and it's just awful. Because I remember listening to it, and I remember as a youngster listening to this stuff going, why is it so smeared? Why is it so? But if you listen to those two prior albums Elton John did, fidelity, the background vocals, everything's there. It's full. You go to Yellow Brick Road, and it just
wasn't the same
awful.
For you, yeah.
It's just awful. And it just changed consoles. Actually, parts of our console, I guess, were disappearing is what happened.
Yeah.
That's why they left our consoles. But AdVision, that was a lot of great.
But the Beatles never recorded on Spectra because they were just in a different
world. But John Lennon never used anything but Spectra. That's all he used.
At what point?
When he left.
When he left. Okay, when he started doing his songs.
Now, there may have been a few others, but when he was at Record Plant New York, that's where he got shot.
Right.
He had Roy Cicala was his personal engineer.
Yeah, and I've had Steve Marcantonio has been on the show. Hopefully he'll be back
he worked
again.
with Roy. Roy gave him a start, and the thing is that's what Lennon used. And then even when they went to Record Plant L.A., it was still on a Spectra desk.
And that was Jay Messina also?
Yeah, Jay.
Was also there.
And Jay's got a funny story about Jay. He probably doesn't remember who I am, but we were developing the prototype 502 two-channel strip. And he calls me and he says, yeah, it sounds just like Studio A, Record Plant A. He says, but 7K's got a problem. I said, okay. So we go back and it was the wrong resistor value. I mean, David Hewish, same group.
David Hewitt?
Hewitt.
Yeah.
He
was doing the remote truck.
Yeah, Hewitt. I'm sorry, not Hewish. Hewitt. Yeah. He came to me one day and he said, when the prototype started showing up in New York, when I was working with Roy, because Roy had a studio we were working with, I guess he walked in the door. He says, that sounds like Studio A. And he's in another room. I'm going, my God, how good are these ears on these guys? It's just, I mean.
The thing about hearing is once you know.
But they could pick out Studio A in the hallway.
Yeah.
But that's the harmonics. You listen to a lot of Spectra recordings, like the old ZZ Top and that. It's got a certain sound to it. Like you say, Big Star. I mean, it's got a certain fullness, a certain sound. And so a lot of my Spectra customers, they'll say they can pick it right out. Mm-hmm. Like all the Carpenters albums were all Spectra. They had a Spectra desk.
Amazing.
They had a Spectra tape machine. That Scully 116, that's what they had.
Oh, and you've got a couple of Scullys.
Yeah, I've got a couple of 116s.
Oh, didn't you say one of those maybe used to be Michael Jackson?
Well, I have a 2-track that was in Dilly's office, and I inherited it. And the only photograph I've ever seen of it other than mine, it was in Michael Jackson's studio.
Wow.
And I think it was a prototype. And it's the 116, which was a product, basically was all Spectra Sonics electronics. So the transport's funky, but the electronics, the headroom is just through the roof.
Amazing.
And in fact, we're bringing that 2-track back online in our little studio. I've just got done recapping it, and we're going to start using it for some mix down stuff. A couple of 610s in front of it with doing mix down on it. But they had an ongoing bet at the Hollywood office, the Spectra Sonics Hollywood office. Anybody brings a 2-track in to shoot against this thing, no one ever could beat it. Another funny story, now we could let it go away. The 16-track, they were doing a Hollywood Bowl, they were doing a big production, and all the PA gear were doing with Spectra Sonics, the power amps, the speakers, which were JBLs at the time. Well, Ampex shows up with the very first VTR, and they were going to record the production on live TV. They were going to record on this Ampex VTR. Well, the VTR went down, I guess, the day before, crashed. And Bob Pana, who worked for Bill, genius, one Bill's geniuses that worked for him, I don't know if Bob's still with us, he cut the inductors off the 116, which limited the bandwidth, and they recorded video with their audio tape machine.
Oh, wow.
Megacycle.
Video onto the audio. Oh, fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, they recorded the video.
Wow.
Yeah, it shows you the bandwidth. Just clip the inductors.
Boy, I'm getting out of my depth going there.
But isn't that wild?
Yeah.
They recorded video with a audio tape machine. But that tells you the speed we're involved with. Like these old Spectra 100 series. I mean, they had 101s. They're basically 101s.
Yeah.
Modified EQ'd 101s. But That's
cool story.
But anyway, we're a little bit in tape machines, but I think I may have Michael Jackson's 2-track.
Awesome. Well, on that note, that's a good one to close
yeah.
on. So, Bill, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Rockstars, thank you for watching and hanging with us and listening. If you're listening, come on over to YouTube and check out the video. And if you're here watching this as a video, hit the like button, please, so that we can, this video can reach more people like yourself to enjoy it. And hit the subscribe so you don't miss future videos from us. And then also, if you've got questions about any of this stuff, any of the gear, drop them right in the comments. I'll either answer them if I can with what I know about this. I'll make sure Bill's aware of them too. So if you've got questions about stuff, that's a great way to just get in there and get them answered. And then just also reach out to Bill directly at Spectra1964. Bill at Spectra1964. It's an easy one.
Yeah.
.com, of course. And Bill, thanks for hanging with us,
man.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time.
Pleasure as always, dude.
Thank you, sir.
I'm ready to go make some music, dude.
Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our fantastic sponsors who make this episode possible. Isotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Atom Audio, Spectra1964, Grace Design, and Picker. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase at isotope.com or nativeinstruments.com. And don't forget, you can start mixing right now with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes below. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, because it's a great way to help support this show. And I'd also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Daria Tupesis, and Max Young. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.